Uganda is born again.
Mubirabye. Mubiwulidde.
And you will see what NRM means. We are going to crush those criminals.
Mubyenyigiddemu.
We are simply peacefully telling our people, say no to rigged elections.
Ebimu mubitegeera.
Naffe tusobola okutiisatiisa abo abatiisatiisa.
Oba oli awo ng'abamu mugwamu bigwe. Yabaffe byava ku ki?
Era kyova olaba baatukolera ne constitution esinga obusiru mu nsi yonna.
Bino n'ebirala birindirire buli lwa Sande okuva ku ssaawa 11 okutuuka ku ssaawa 1 ey'akawungeezi n'eyaliko Katikkiro wa Buganda Oweekitiibwa Dani Muliika ku program Eriiso ly'Omukulu ku Facebook page The Alternative Uganda.
Hey Ugandans, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Dewa Kiki, the Deputy Defense Spokesperson and actually the Deputy Spokesperson for the Uganda People's Defense Forces. I was hosted on Alternative Digital. I encourage all Ugandans that this is the way to go. Always watch, participate, give your views and ask questions on Alternative Digital. Digital, the way to go.
The world is at a critical moment of providing innovative alternatives as a means to create change.
As such, we have created a not-for-profit alternative mobile digital platform as a way to promote space for freedom of speech and expression to the unheard voices.
We know you believe in the cause and you can further it more by contributing to its sustainability in forms of internet data, fuel, and any other support you deem relevant.
Please support us with your contribution to Equity Bank account number 103-5201-607252 under the name Alternative Digital, or our mobile money numbers 0702-900076 or 0783-047785. Alternative Digital. Real issues, real talk.
This is a time where there is a lot of violence. For example, police brutality. A lot of you are being beaten up, the voters, the people from the opposing side. So election is just that period where we get free money.
An election is a process through which people choose to vote a person or a group of people to hold an office of leadership.
Did you know that you have the power to determine on who leads you?
Did you know that your vote has the power to change your society and the country at large?
Dear citizens, please vote wisely. Don't vote money, but vote issues.
Dear parents, I can't make any decision.
Your choice determines my future.
Fellow students, exercise your right. Go and vote.
Abafumbira mwese muzaze tugende tutera karuru.
Abanyayuganda mwena mugende mutera karuru.
Bashange face yihule kuche hodole.
Abantu nyana mujje tugende tukome.
Genda oronde.
Your vote.
My vote.
Our vote is our present and our future.
The Alternative Digital. Real issues, real talk.
Amacha amalungi erigwe munafe atukeredeko ku mpewo zaffe za The Alternative Digital. Olunaku lwakuna ennaku z'omwezi 3 omwezi wa December omwaka 2020.
gwe munange akyalina by'obuusabuusa mu guno omwaka alhamdulillah mukama omwaka agututambuliza bulungi ate era guweddeko kubanga tubala bubazi nnaku ezibulayo tugambe nti kale 2020 tugikubye olukumu twebulayo bubuzi tubala bubazi nnaku kati gwe munange wali osetinze goals zo eza 2020 nga tezayitseemu tokugamba bugambi nti munange kano sike kaseera ate ak'okweraliikirira oba okuwarenga it is the time to reflect what went wrong generally gwali mwaka mubi nemeguteeka nnyo lockdown so bannange ffe tubasaba busabe nti mu reflecting ate mukole strategies eza 2021 okulaba nti ate bye mwali musetinze mu 2020 mubyakyivinga mu 2021 naye nga tenjagala okubajjukiza nti tobuzaayo ennaku 4 tugende tulonde president n'ababaka bammwe abagenda okubakikirira mu parliament oba omubakawo agenda okukikirira mu parliament for the next 5 years 14th January wate munange ffe tuba tukubiriza nti olwo olunaku va mu nnyumbayo wonna wonna oba oli we lunaabala okusanze ogende okubeya akalulu. Farida Bikobere is my name. Olaba the mighty drive ku alternative digital. Our Facebook page is the Alternative Uganda. Munange gwatana tugoberera oba atana tulikinga, go to your Facebook account, search engine teekamu the Alternative Uganda. Ogenda kubanga ate otufuna bulungi nnyo, like the page and follow us. Ate munaye bwomala nyiga ku notification button obere nti ofuna notification every when we go live. Olunaku lubeera lwa Monday paka Friday saawa ebeeremu ey'okumakya paka saawa 3. Olunaku lwa leero we have a lawyer in the studios. Tana tutukako naye ngate musubira okuntukako anytime from now. Omwami oba Council Nicholas Opiyo, he is the ED chapter 4 Uganda. Abamanyiko balwanyirizi b'eddembe abaddewo nnyonyo abadde musaale mu kulwanirira eddembe eri abanna Uganda. So he is our guest today. Tana tukako in the next 10 or 15 minutes agenda kubanga ate alina mu studios zaffe olunaku lwa leero. Today I am working with omwami Tumuhimbise Norman as my co-host. Akyali wabwera wakwasaganya omugenyi waffe olunaku bagenda kubanga ate banegattako in the next 10 or 15 minutes. So enda kubanga mbatwala mu bwomu nga we are in the AIDS week. So nze njagala okubajjukiza abavubuka twekuume kubanga ate obulamu tebulina spare. Bwoba olwadde omanyi bwoba tonafuna kawuka oyogeza amalala naye ate munnange wekanagwa mu mubiri gwo ogenda ate abamumujjamu obusungu n'ogamba nange eyakansiiga saamumanya nawe ate n'otandika okulwaza abalala. Ffe tubagamba bugambi ba mikwano mwekuume. Use a condom if you can't abstain or if you can't be faithful to your partner. Munnange ate use a condom. It is always good to have safe sex or safe intercourse because if we can't tell you the things, no one is going to tell you these things. Atenga munange ye corona atta era wali ekimufuula ow'enjawulo nti ye attirawo oba tatwala kabanga kanene nnyo naye ate AIDS bwe bulwadde obugenda okukwata, you start isolating yourself. Bulina psychological effects nyingi nnyo. So tubagamba bannange tetwagala ate eyo mutuukeyo, tubagala muli balamu. So tubakubiriza mwekuume, mwambale condom, you who cannot abstain or who can't be faithful to one partner. Naye nga ate option eyali badde entuufu yali badde nti beera ne partner w'omu gw'omanyi status ye. Mwekuume, kuuma obulamu bwo okumenya obulamu bwa munno. Munnange ate ne bw'onoobuukira abasajja ne bw'obuukira abakazi 10, nze ffe tugamba nti ate omukazi obeerako n'omu gw'oyagala bali oba ozanyisa bazanyise. So tubagamba being faithful to one partner kigenda kutaasa obulamu bwo gwe ng'omusajja oba omukyala, ate otaase n'obwoyo omulala gw'oba olina mu relationship naye. Naye ng'ate njagala bakubiriza abavubuka mwewale emivuyo. Tuli mu kaseera ka kalulu, mwewale nnyo emivuyo giyitiridde. New Vision waleera tugamba nti to have been babateese munda lwa nsonga nti bagenda bayuza ebipande bya president Yoweri Kaguta Museveni nga babiyuzaamu amaaso babiyuzaako amatu so tubagamba mubeere non-violent, let us all be responsible, tubeere mu kalulu ak'ekitiibwa buli omu respecting munne gwali naye mu reesi ebintu bitambule bulungi engeri gy'otayagala muntu kuyuza posta yo bw'oba respectinga ne posta z'abantu abalala kubanga bazikubisa ssente ate munnange si zaabwerere ate ssente mpitirivu so omuntu bw'abanga avuddeyo n'ateeka posta ye kubo wonna waba agiteese bannange muziwe ekitiibwa kubanga all that is money atali gwe ali ewaka ng'ate ogenda kukola mukwano nze njagala okukubiriza z'okuka ogenda okole obudde bwebwo bwo bwakedde ddaffe abali might drive tuba twakutuuseeko dda naye ng'ate era njagala okukubiriza mukwano z'okuka genda okole omwana omuwala akyebase nze njagala okukubiriza abaana abawala tebakyebaka kuguna omulembe. As you are all fighting for equality, mwagala gender equality, bannange mugende mukole. Temugenda kwa taininga gender equality nga mchatudde waka nga wegolola mu buliri sawa nyezo kumacha bwokubesi mugogamba omusajja akuweereze sente z'okulya, akuweereze sente z'enviiri, manya siyina bizigo ate njagala kola shopping yangoye nga munnange tokola eyo attainment mugenda gifuna nze mbakubiriza abaana abawala mugende mukole muzukuke noonye ekyokukola genda okikole gwe graduate mulekerawo okunyoma emirimu because omulimu gwe wasomerera guyinza okulwawo ate okufunika naye ng'ate wajja kubeerawo gino gy'otaasomerera nga osobola okugukola nga bw'olinda guli gwe wasomerera so tukugamba nti ebiwandiiko byo ng'okyabikumye ewakaawo mu nnyumba osobola okugenda n'ofuna okola akalimo akalejjalejja ate munnange osobola okubeerawo weewale okuba nti ate oyinza okulaba omuntu akutte essimu n'otandika okuba obufaananyi bwenjibba essimu eyo tebagimpaamu emitwalo 3 so tukubiriza bukubiriza nti genda okole tonyoma mulimu oba asoma busomesa nganze bwe bakuwaate akalima akalala mukwano genda okakole nga bulinda guli gwe wasomerera tekirina musitaani zina bagamba esente z'oyo ayonja ejje tukyamira ne tweyamba n'oyo akola mu Stanbic Bank bwe guba mutwalo value eba yemu value y'omutwalo eyo yakola mu Stanbic Bank oba oba anywhere nawe akirininga oba ayera hotel oba asimula hotel value y'esente ezo eba yemuso tubakubiriza bamikwano temunyoma mirimu mugende mukole esaawa zo zintwalagana naye atera ndaba omugenyi wange anatera wali wananatera okuntukako anytime from now ndaba ko host yetala omwami Tumuhimbise no man we are going muka healthy break katoni nnyo tugenda kanga ate tukoma wono mugenyi waffe olunaku omwami Nicholas Opiyo Council Nicholas Opiyo he is the ED chapter for Uganda. Farida Bikobere is my name. You are watching The Might Drive once.
You have got to get up pretty early to go do something. We are the Alternative Dig Talk. With our mobile studios, we are redefining TV presentation just as technology is setting the pace. We are blending our approach with fresh, perspectively designed breakfast show, The Mighty Drive, informative and entertainment show, exclusive and live interviews.
We President Museveni wadde juzi namulaba apima akawunga kilo 2 tasobola kalya nini bwaba alya kilo 5 oyannema okuliisa eggwanga ne bwe limundekera.
Njagala kwebaza the Alternative Dig Talk etuwadde kano ka Mighty Drive era n'abatuwuliriza bonna abali ku mikutu njagala basaba mugendo mu maaso n'okuwuliriza.
All given to you just a click away on your phone, tablet, laptop and smart TVs. as we are streaming live on our social media platforms, on the road and on the go. We are the Alternative Dig Talk.
Hey Ugandans, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Dewa Kiki, the Deputy Defense Spokesperson and actually the Deputy Spokesperson for the Uganda People's Defense Forces. I was hosted on Alternative Dig Talk. I encourage all Ugandans that this is the way to go. Always watch, participate, give your views and ask questions on Alternative Dig Talk. Dig Talk, the way to go.
Uganda is born again.
Mubirabye. Mubiwulidde.
And you will see what NRM means. We are going to crush those criminals.
Mubyenyigiddemu.
We are simply peacefully telling our people, say no to rigged elections.
Ebimu mubitegeera.
Naffe tusobola okutiisatiisa abo abatiisatiisa.
Oba oli awo ng'abamu mugwamu bigwe. Byabaffe byava ku ki?
Era kyova olaba baatukolera ne constitution esinga obusiru mu nsi yonna.
Bino n'ebirala birindirire buli lwa Sande okuva ku ssaawa 11 okutuuka ku ssaawa 1 ey'akawungeezi n'eyaliko Katikkiro wa Buganda Oweekitiibwa Dani Muliika ku program Eriiso ly'Omukulu ku Facebook page The Alternative Uganda.
The world is at a critical moment of providing innovative alternatives as a means to create change.
As such, we have created a not-for-profit alternative mobile digital platform as a way to promote space for freedom of speech and expression to the unheard voices.
We know you believe in the cause and you can further it more by contributing to its sustainability in forms of internet data, fuel, and any other support you deem relevant.
Please support us with your contribution to Equity Bank account number 103-5201-607252 under the name Alternative Digital, or our mobile money numbers 0702-900076 or 0783-047785. Alternative Digital. Real issues, real talk.
This is a time where there is a lot of violence. For example, police brutality. A lot of you are being beaten up, the voters, the people from the opposing side. So election is just that period where we get free money.
An election is a process through which people choose to vote a person or a group of people to hold an office of leadership.
Did you know that you have the power to determine on who leads you? Did you know that your vote has the power to change your society and the country at large?
Dear citizens, please vote wisely. Don't vote money, but vote issues.
Dear parents, I can't make any decision.
Your choice determines my future.
Fellow students, exercise your right. Go and vote.
Abafumbira mwese muzaze tugende tutera akaruru.
Abanyayuganda mwena mugende mutera akaruru.
Bashange face yihule kucha hudole.
Abantu nyana mujje tugende tukome.
Genda olonde.
Your vote.
My vote. Our vote is our present and our future.
The Alternative Dig Talk. Real issues, real talk.
Well, thanks Ugandans and all people that are abroad that are following us on our social media page, the Alternative Uganda, and also those that are following us on YouTube, the Alternative Uganda also. Today, we have Counsel Nicholas Opiyo in the studio. He's one of those best lawyers we have, human rights lawyers in town. If you have been in running battles with police in regards to rights violations and the rest, I'm sure that you have, in one way or the other, been with him in court representing you, but also challenging so many unconstitutional laws and the rest. In the morning today, you must have watched one of us, Farida Bikobere, whom I worked with this morning, until when she stepped out, so that she could give us some space to continue with the entire discussion with the Counsel Nicholas Opiyo with the ED for Chapter 4. Counsel, say hello to our viewers and followers as the Alternative League talk, and then we can begin, sir.
Norman, what a delight to share this morning with you on this very innovative, forward-looking Digitalk. It is exciting to see young people getting deeply concerned about issues of public matters and public affairs. So it really is an honor to be invited to the show. I'm really grateful. I'm looking forward to a fruitful discussion. And to those who are listening in or watching from wherever you are, share this. Let's have a discussion this morning.
Thank you, Counsel. There are lots of events that are taking place in this country, but for starters, save for Chapter 4 as your organization. What is this Chapter 4 in our Constitution in the first place?
Well, the organization is named after the Bill of Rights, which is contained in the 4th chapter of the Constitution. So Chapter 4 Uganda is a civil rights organization dedicated to providing pro bono legal services in defense of civil liberties, for the advancement of social justice, and with a specific focus on pro-democracy activists, human rights defenders, and the most marginalized in our society.
Good. I mean, our viewers out there might ask, does Chapter 4 extend its capacity in other districts? Say, if people have issues in Western Uganda, far Western, what do these people do in case they want such pro bono services?
So first of all, let me just underline the fact that there's a lot more demand for our services than we can offer. Every single day we get hundreds of calls and requests for legal assistance, many of whom are asking for legal advice, some are asking for legal representation. So the amount of requests for the services is enormous. But we are a national organization. As I speak now, my colleagues are in West Nile, in the districts of Arua, Yumbe, Koboko, and Ajumani, providing pro bono legal support to human rights defenders there. So we are a national organization, but we're also a very small, lean team that is based here in Kampala. But our approach to work has been, in most of the cases that we will send our own lawyers to go and represent people across the country. But we also work through a network of public-spirited lawyers who, if in the event that we are unable to go to Kawale or go to Moroto, those lawyers are there who would speak to them, who will provide the necessary instructions to them, and they will represent the clients that they have to represent there. So we work through a network of lawyers that is in-house. But also outside of Chapter 4, there is now a growing community of public interest lawyers and many organizations with whom we work. So we cross-refer issues. If somebody approaches us with a particular problem that is outside of the mandate of the organization, we are always happy to refer them to other entities that are in our network. So there are many other people there who supplement or complement the work that we do.
Okay.
I hope we also complement theirs in one way or the other.
Yeah, true. Because the fight for injustices is really broad. It's big. Every single contribution really matters a lot. Even as the Alternative Digitalk, the mere fact that we are able to have you and also offer time, this alone is another crystal contribution. Before we came here, Counsel, there are so many people that were inboxing us, and their concern was, why is this constitution, for now, all the period has been operational in English? Just one language.
Look, the Constitution provides that it should be translated into the local languages of this country, and gives that mandate to the Uganda Human Rights Commission. Strikingly, ever since the Constitution was promulgated in 1995, I'm not aware of any attempt to translate it into any major language. As a result, the vast majority of the people in this country who do not speak or cannot read English have been denied the opportunity to know what is contained in the Constitution. In essence, there has been a dereliction of duty on the part of government agencies mandated to translate the Constitution. The last time I heard about a translation of the Constitution, it was from the Uganda Law Reform Commission, and it was being discussed in a very cavalier, money-making, workshop-like project. But this is not how we should treat our Constitution. The commitment to translate this Constitution, to make it available to the last person in the country, really is something we must take a little bit more serious and invest more money in it. That alongside translations, besides, you also have the overall civic education, because civic education really is supposed to make people understand their rights, to understand the law. Now, we tend to have electoral, education, voter education towards election, but we have completely forgotten about civic education. In any case now, we see civil society taking the place of the state in providing civic education, even in the school curriculum. When I grew up, we used to sing every morning all the 3 stanzas of the national anthem. Now, many people cannot even sing the second stanza if you ask them.
Council, you said the powers to translate our constitution is given to...
But the duty, not even a power.
The duty, actually, the duty. One would ask, so who is to blame now that it's not translated? Is it the government or the Human Rights Commission? Or even you as councils, by the way, because one would ask, have you petitioned the court in any case in that regard?
There is a petition in the courts. There's no need for all of us to petition. Somebody has already gone to the courts to compel the state to translate the Constitution. But I think the problem is much bigger than just a neglect of duty, a failure to interpret, so translate the Constitution.
Neglect of duty by who, Council?
By the state, by government. I think that we have never taken this Constitution as a serious document, in spite of all the hopes that this Constitution excited in people when it was enacted. The Ugandan government has just never taken this Constitution seriously, both in the way that they treat it, in the way that they obey its command or disregard its command, but also in the way they just disregard fundamental rights and freedoms. So the overall problem is really a deeply decadent political system that looks at the Constitution as a suggestion, as a mere piece of document, not as a serious governance compact. And so the failure or the refusal to translate it into local languages is just part of that broader decay in our politics. But I also think that over time, what we have begun to see is the projectization of government work. If there's no donor money for it, nobody will do it. The taxpayer money that they collect from us, God knows what they do with it. Perhaps it is used for funding the patronage system that the NRM government runs. If there is no donor funding for it, nobody will do it. Government officials spend their time chasing proposals and grants. If you go to the Ministry of Health, that place is run by foreigners because they provide grants and money for it. So we don't seem to see an inherent interest in running the country in a way that should benefit everybody else. What we see is a consistent projectization. And so a lot of it has been left to civil society to do civic education, to do legal aid for people. And unless we deal with the political problem, this kind of problems will still persist.
Great. Council, in the same line, at least I know that ignorance of the law is no defense. How would you, in your view, don't you think when you compare the high rates of crime, could you relate it with the ignorance of law? And in many cases, like, people are not aware of what is in the Constitution because it's in English in the first place, and for that case, therefore, it makes them commit crimes because they don't even know whether they are right or anything. Because all the laws that we have in Uganda, in any case, be it the penal code, be it the Constitution, and the rest are purely in English. Do you think they relate?
Not necessarily. I think that people wake up every morning and don't kill you, not because there's a law that allows that prohibits murder. People wake up every morning and don't go raping around or defiling around because there's a law. They are afraid of the law. I think that there's a certain level of loss of values in our legal system, so much so that I think that what keeps us now is the social, cultural, religious, moral values that we hold. Because unless you have a system in which people are taught, because good is inherent, good is not enforced on all of us by the law. The law is merely supplementing what is good. They break down in our social fabric. And these things take time to get to the level where it is at, but they also take time to reverse. It starts from leaders showing good examples. If a government minister does not want to follow traffic rules, does not want to stop at the traffic lights, if a government minister would want to use government funds, government vehicles to go and ferry charcoal from the village, these kind of things over time builds. We have had a consistent lack of exemplary leadership at many levels of our society that has now caused a complete moral decadence. And therefore, many of these things are a result of that. The breakdown of families, economic hardships. I think that ignorance of the law is not necessarily the cause of all the problems you're having. Rather, what I think we should do as a matter of reversal is go back to the basic and re-examine our sense of social fabric, our sense of good and bad, and have leaders who lead by example. Because you have a person in the traffic taking his children to school and has kids in the back in the school and is driving on the wrong side of the road.
The kids are copying the parents.
The kids are watching and they think that is normal. You know, in many cases, if you complain to the person, they might even insult you. The kids are watching. So I think we have to go back to that level in which we build the social fabric of our society. But that is not to discount the importance of spreading knowledge of the law, because the law provides for your rights. People have to know their rights, so that if a government minister who is in no way entitled to a right of way in traffic tries to cut you, you can tell them off, say, but the law is clear, we know our rights. So it is important that we, to the extent possible, educate the people about the law, let them know what the law says, let them know what their rights are and what their obligations are in law.
Okay. Whoever is watching us and following us live on our social media page, the Alternative Uganda Facebook page and YouTube, we are still with the Council Nicholas Opiyo. We're discussing rights. We're discussing lots of rights and freedoms, and that's why the organization that he leads is Chapter 4, and that's pure rights and freedoms. Council, we are aware you've been in so many battles, legal battles, challenging government and any other powers that be. How far with the Kasese matters, by the way?
Look, I think that you're going to see some actions in regards to the hundreds of innocent victims of the aftermath of that incident. Consistently, we have been engaging the prosecutorial body, reviewing what they think is evidence that they have, and so many people in their tens, if not hundreds, are going to be set free. That might be delayed justice after 4 or 5 years.
What do you mean, Council, being set free? Is it like, should we say, were there talks, or it's the legal process that is going to set them free?
No. I mean, even
they
that,
being pardoned or something?
even that is a legal process, not a pardon, because a pardon is given to somebody when they are convicted.
Okay.
So there are no convicts yet in this case. But the point is that after the incident in Kasese, the massacre in Kasese by government forces, hundreds of young innocent people were arrested and incarcerated in various parts of the country. Many lost their lives. The point that I'm making is that those who have been arrested and incarcerated, who are tortured and sent away in army detention facilities or in government prisons, are about to be released. Many of them are about to be released because we have consistently been engaging institutions of the state to ensure that those who have no case against them, none at all, should be released. I'm aware that there are processes and initiatives to have many of them released, and perhaps very soon you might see some actions in that regard. But secondly, and most importantly, we quietly have been documenting the number of fatalities, the people who died, people who were killed, and putting together the evidence that we need for future actions. This is important. People might discount it, but let me just give you an example that 75 years after the World War, people are still being arrested and prosecuted. Many years after the 1994 Rwandan genocide, people are still being arrested. Felician Kabuga was arrested in France recently and will face his day in court. All of that is only possible because there was a meticulous documentation of human rights violations by these individuals. So they may have the protection of the state now, but I think that the protection of the state is temporary. If we have proper evidence at time T and point P, people like Iluelo will face their day in court. People who commanded the massacre in Kasese,
It's the very question I want to ask.
will face their day in court.
Does that mean that you are putting all this evidence onto hold until time T when this protection of these people is done, or you would rather proceed and when things do not work, again, you keep your evidence and reinstate the same suits against them?
I understand the desire to see a court action in a court of law. I understand that desire. But I think we have to be strategic in the way that we approach this. There are other non-court legal proceedings against these individuals that have already been completed. The defense, the commandant of land forces, Iluelo, is under enormous sanctions. These sanctions didn't just happen. They were a result of consistent work and documentation. He is unable to travel out of this country to go to the US, for example. He's unable to transact any US-funded government projects. So he's a deeply, deeply haunted man. Little wonder he's building an altar in his home compound. People who know him will tell you he's gone cuckoos. So there are certain legal proceedings and processes that is being put to bear to bring pressure on these individuals. But there is also a process to compile proper legal court justice approach. The challenge has been, and I'll be very honest with you here, that the victims of the incident who are supposed to give you the evidence, are supposed to swear the evidence, are also under immense threat and pressure from the state. Somebody who has lost their child is being given 4 million shillings by the president's brother in what they call an economic initiative, and they are being threatened not to go to court. That if they went to court, they will be hurt. There are also, many initiatives by the state. For example, after Kasese, they opened a whole battalion now in the Rwenzori region, and so things are happening that makes it difficult now for people to volunteer, come forward and go to court. But people have suffered, and at some point that's appropriate, we will see legal actions against these individuals.
Councillor, you've talked about some success in regards to setting the victims free for now. Those that lost their lives, what is there any special arrangements in regards to the legal process, say in regards to any compensations or something? Leave the president's brother giving token, but rather the legal view and the legal compensation for the dead, people who died in the attacks.
The only way that individuals who lost their lives can get compensated if we get a court judgment compelling the state to provide adequate compensation for their loss. As I said, the process to file cases is still, very far from being complete. And when we do so, we'll seek that compensation. Right now, there's no court case that I'm aware of that is seeking compensation for these victims. What I'm aware of is an initiative led by local politicians to file a case at the International Criminal Court in The Hague. I'm not sure how far that process has gone. I'm not involved in it. But that is also a legal process to seek redress. I hope that in one way or the other, that process materializes as well.
So back to Edward and others. In your view, do you think mere blocking them from accessing states and any other countries, is that relevant to them in your view, you think? Because one would ask, so you mean if he doesn't go abroad, and then what? Do you think they are attached in any case? That mere blocking them from flying to states is that strong?
Oh yeah, it's powerful. You have to understand the nature of of how they work. Let me just give you an example. The UPDF is entirely, for their mission in Somalia, funded and supported by the European Union taxpayer money and American taxpayer money. The biggest beneficiaries of this external support to the Uganda People's Defense Forces has been their commanders, who are decorated and called heroes for fighting in Somalia, who are the subject of admiration from hundreds of people in the military circles. Those things matter. Those things matter. Many of these people have their kids study in foreign capitals. And so if you
just escort your kids up to the airport till you come back.
If you impose,
even when they graduate, you can't.
But if you impose sanctions on them, it is impossible for those families to take their kids abroad anymore. It is a powerful tool. It's subtle, but exceedingly powerful.
Second, Council, our viewers would want to know, what's the sanction area? Do these sanctions also take the family, or it's the individual of Edwelu?
Well, if the breadwinner, in the case of Edwelu, is an individual sanction. In the case of Kale Kaihura, is him and his family, him and his wife and his children. In the case of Edwelu, it's an individual sanction because it was deemed that these were actions that could not extend to his family. But if you tighten the source of income, if you make it impossible for him to transact in any U.S. systems, which really is the backbone of our economic system, because any bank in Uganda transacts through U.S. financial systems. And that's why those sanctions are exceedingly important. And at a personal level, they really bite. They really do bite. You have to ask those who have been sanctioned. What it does mean, for example, is no financial institution in this country should transact with you. You can't open a bank account. You cannot send mobile money. Because if you do, these institutions risk facing even greater sanctions from the U.S. government. And I can tell you, we are investigating financial institutions who are still stiffly facilitating transactions with these individuals, and at some point you're going to see some actions towards that.
Okay, viewers out there, we still have Councillor Nicholas Opiyo, the ED for Chapter 4, the purpose for which him and others considered having the organization named Chapter 4. It's because of the Bill of Rights in our 1995 Constitution as amended. We are on social media, on our social media page, The Alternative Uganda. We are discussing law, rights, and active citizenry. Council, you have watched and followed the sequence of events. I have been discussing off record with you about the Chibokos now and all these shootings and the rest. What's your take? What do you think? What do you think causes all this, in quotes, madness, either between the citizens and the leaders? And in fact, therein, I would also ask, okay, I have my rights violated. Must I go to streets and burn tires and dig holes in the roads?
Narratives are important. The regime mouthpieces and apologists have sought to describe what happened in Uganda as riots. Nothing could be further from the truth. There was a legitimate political concern following the brutal arrest of an opposition presidential candidate. Those people who took to the streets in their hundreds were protesting that legitimate political concern. The vast majority of people who were chanting and shouting were not rioters, were protesters protesting an injustice. There's no doubt that there were a few people who burnt tires. Like in every protest, there are always people who will take advantage of it. There are people who are involved in criminality. But that should not in any way discount the legitimate political concerns of the hundreds of Ugandans who chanted, who wore party colors, who flew party flags in protest of what happened. I have a list of 84 dead bodies. Many of these people were not involved in any act of...
84, not the 50, something they're telling us.
Well, the 54 that President Museveni gave us on Sunday were 54 from one morgue, the city morgue, run by the police. Even in the city morgue, as of Sunday, there were 6 other unclaimed dead bodies. But the body counts of people who died outside of the hospital were not in that statistics. The body count of people who were injured and went to Mulago Hospital and died afterwards, if you add all of that, we are documenting that we so far have 82 bullet-ridden bodies of Ugandans. None of those were involved in riots, as far as I'm concerned. Many of them were innocent bystanders who were perhaps caught up in the wrong place, who were shot at point-blank range. It includes 12-year-olds, 16-year-olds, senior 2 students, include single mothers, food vendors, people who were in their garages working, and because they were working in a low-income area, a garage was thought to be the place where tires were coming from. They got in there and killed and shot and killed people. So the people who died were not people who were even involved in any burning of tires. And I think that we have to defend and define that narrative for what it is, that there was a small group of people involved in acts of criminality, but the bigger problem that got us here is a political treatment of an opposition party and the vast majority of people who were demonstrating against that. But secondly, a trigger-happy, near-criminal state that has taken a war posture and sees the campaigns by the opposition as an insurrection. And you can tell by the amount of deployment. If you walked into Kampala in some parts of the city, you might think that Joseph Kony was in town. The last time I saw this kind of deployment was when I was growing up as a child in northern Uganda. Heavily armed, warlike formations of soldiers patrolling the streets, especially in poor income areas. So there is a propensity for violence, a misreading of the situation by state agents who have taken this as an insurrection, as a war, as a rebellion, not as an election.
One would ask, Council, on whether you are able to describe reasonable force and appropriate force by either side. Because even when we, as an active citizen, even when I want to show discontent, there should be some reasonable force, for lack of another word, and appropriate force through which I should express my anger towards government, vis-a-vis the other side also exposing, or rather applying their reasonable force as well, or appropriate force towards me. What, in your view, when it comes to your PDF and police, what do you think they should have done?
First, the state has the monopoly of violence. What underpins the legitimacy of the state is its ability to control violence and to unleash violence wherever it deems necessary. There is no justification for private citizens to use force to propagate their ideas. The law provides for peaceful demonstration. It doesn't necessarily mean quiet demonstration. You could shout, you could walk the streets, you could picket, you could carry placards and make your voice heard. But you cannot in any way resort to means of violence as a means of exercising a right. So it has to be clear that people engaged in political discourse must do so in a lawful, peaceful manner. On the part of the state is, as I said, the monopoly of violence is in the hands of the state. That's why they are allowed to arm, they are allowed to recruit a militia, they are allowed to recruit a, police force, because they need to use that to protect the integrity of the state, territorial or otherwise. Now, in applying that force, the state has, it's not an unqualified use of force. For example, extrajudicial killings that we are seeing on the streets of Kampala is unlawful. If anyone is accused of a crime, that person should be apprehended, that person should be dragged before a court of law, accorded a fair hearing, and if guilty, or if the person has pleaded guilty, convicted and sent away to a prison. Or the court can give you a death sentence because it's still lawful in Uganda. The state has no right to shoot and kill people on sight. Absolutely not. In the use of force, there's a 3-tier test of the use of force. The first one, is it lawful? The force used must be lawful. And killing on the street is not lawful. Torture is not lawful. So any force used to apprehend, to suppress what they see as a public disorder must be that which is lawful. Number 2, it has to be proportionate to the threat being faced. The state soldiers are armed to the teeth. They have helmets. They have body, hammers that protect them from. They're trained. They are specifically trained for that. And your first resort, really, to a person holding a stone and shooting at you, and stoning you, should not be the use of a lethal weapon.
We saw one of the citizens hammering the police officer. Okay,
yeah. Look, it's not to condone what that person was seen doing in the video. That's wrong. But the point is, how do you react to that as a police? Do you shoot the person dead? You have to apprehend that person, because we have to ask of our police force, our army, a higher duty, because that's why they are trained. That's why they don't pay taxes. That's why they live in free government houses and don't pay electricity bills. They have a higher responsibility to act responsibly to protect human rights. But there's also a third qualification. So there's the lawfulness of the force, the proportionality of the force, okay? But thirdly, that it has to be within reasonable force, and in the sense that what an ordinary man on the street would do. Would you drive an armored personnel car used in Somalia to fight Al-Shabaab on the streets of Kampala in the name of dispersing a protest? A protest? No, you don't. It's unreasonable. So the use of force is qualified. It is not a blanket use of force, even including, and I've seen this thing being done consistently, when people gather and there is a concern about the gathering being a breach of the peace, we fire tear gas indiscriminately at the crowd and disperse people, so that even people who are on the sideline, bystanders, are affected by tear gas. The duty of the state is to go and remove the people in the gathering who are causing problems. It is not to fire indiscriminately and chase everybody away in disarray.
Okay, so we saw police give directives in regards to buying fuel in jerry cans or something. In your view, do you think they are violating rights also? They said no one should buy fuel in any container or in any jerry can. And then my mind was telling me, so those of us who are not able to, say, have full tank, and God forbid you lack fuel, just you run out of fuel on the road, so what do? Do you get a car carrier and take a vehicle to a petrol station or something? Do you think that directive was really appropriate?
No, absolutely, it's baseless. Many people run generators. Do we have to carry generators to a petrol station to fuel it? You don't have to do that. It is completely unreasonable, in my view, that it has no legal basis that we cannot buy fuel in a container. Many people buy kerosene in small little containers to go and light their tado bars at home. That is simply a statement made to create the impression that somebody is buying fuel to burn the city, which is, I think, in my view, false. It has no legal basis, and I think people should just disregard it for what it is.
So we all know.
If I'm a owner of a fuel petrol station, really, not only cars buy fuel,
yeah,
you know, big businesses like hotels run power backups that need fuel. You know, do they carry the entire power backup system to a petrol station? No, they have to buy fuel.
Another school of thought suggests, because we all know that COVID does exist, and therefore, much as we might want to think that the government is against all these numbers, perhaps one would also urge and say, of course, it is to prevent the spread of COVID. What's your take on that? I mean, the president will tell you, for me, I don't get out of the vehicle every when I am moving. I just wave at people, I mean, at a distance. And then for you people, you want to convene people and chant and bring your heads up through the open roof and also attract people to come. Do you think whatever he's saying is said in good faith, or it's just a political statement? Because he even adds he will crush them. I mean,
look, at the beginning of this electoral process, I was one of those who argued for the postponement of the election if COVID was such a big threat as to disrupt normal life. We had closed schools, we had closed churches, we had closed businesses, gyms, saunas, bars, because we said COVID was such a big threat, and therefore our lives were disrupted. Up to now, our kids at home, schools are closed, except for candidate classes that opened recently. And we made the point that if indeed COVID is such a big thing, such a life threat, why should we risk people's lives by holding an election? Of course, we lost that debate. They insisted on holding elections in the COVID era. And no sooner had they enacted COVID regulations to govern election than the NRM held primaries of the election, lining up in large numbers. The minute they did that, they lost public confidence, and people couldn't believe anymore that COVID was indeed such a big thing as to affect our election. In any case, let's look at the numbers. Malaria kills people every day more than COVID.
Second,
Have we closed work because of malaria? No, we didn't. The fatality rate of COVID is less than 3.4%. Of every 100 people who get it, maybe 3 or 4 die. It's not to say they should die, but that as a response to a pandemic, our response may perhaps, with the benefit of hindsight, been disproportionate. And so, when the NRM held their primaries, we began to see government ministers, including the Minister of Health, breaching those guidelines. Ugandans lost faith and said COVID perhaps was being used as a tool to curtail the opposition, because even as we speak now, people in yellow t-shirts can hold large gatherings and nothing happens to them. People downtown now, life is back to normal. Does it mean that there's no COVID downtown? No. So people now believe that COVID is being used as a tool to limit the political fortunes of the opposition. There's no doubt about it. The facts bear them out, because you see what's happening in normal life. It doesn't mean that COVID only spreads when Bobby Wine organizes a rally, or when Amuriat organizes a rally, or indeed Muntu does a rally. No, because the NRM candidate himself has been seen with large crowds. Of course, he's in the age bracket that is more vulnerable to COVID, and it is understandable for him to be very careful. He's aged, he's very old. If he catches COVID, it will be a disaster. It could be a very difficult thing to come out of. And so the self-preservation of Mr. Museveni must not be disguised to mean that the people who he's gathering to wave to, are now following COVID guidelines. I've seen pictures and videos of large crowds welcoming him in districts. And so COVID has just become like the Public Order Management Act, has just become like the Police Act, being waved in the face of the political opposition to limit their access to the people and their campaign. I think that if COVID is a serious thing, call off the election.
So one of the things that I know that advocates like you hate are speech elections. I want to take you back to what you said, that one of the voices that you had was to postpone the elections. What do you think? This time I want to take you slightly off your profession and speculate. What do you think were the fears for the government to postpone the elections?
There were no fears. I think that what the political strategists of the NRM were able to discern very quickly is that their president is not very young anymore, may not have the vigor to traverse the country in the same way we are seeing other people do, and that his work would be made a whole lot easy by disguising and using COVID as an excuse for limiting elections, and therefore it was only selfish for them to do so. They did this because it would make it easier for the NRM to win the election in the context of COVID. But COVID also did provide a very, very good excuse for pillage of the state, the stealing of money. Look at what we see as COVID support, which is now in excess of 8 trillion Uganda shillings. Nearly 75% of it was allocated to State House and the military, not to the Ministry of Health. It was an opportunity for them to steal money, to use that money for financing the system of patronage that they're financing. If you look, for example, the LRM was able to buy bicycles to its yellow bicycles to its village coordinators. We've been talking about buying bicycles for LC1s forever. We haven't seen them.
The money was
stolen. They have bought motorbikes for their sub-county coordinators. The question is, where did that money come from?
Okay, our viewers on the Alternative Uganda's Facebook page, we are still with Councillor Nicholas Opiyo. We'll be coming back shortly in the next a minute or so to continue having an insight. As we return, we're going to discuss about the Electoral Commission, the rallies of the presidential candidates and their subsequent arrests. Don't go away. We're still here with you. We are the Alternative Digital, the mighty.
The Alternative Digital. Real issues, real talk.
This is a time where there is a lot of violence. For example, police brutality. A lot of you are being beaten up, the voters, the people from the opposing side. So election is just that period where we get free money.
An election is a process through which people choose to vote a person or a group of people to hold an office of leadership.
Did you know that you have the power to determine on who leads you?
Did you know that your vote has the power to change your society and the country at large?
Dear citizens, please vote wisely. Don't vote money, but vote issues.
Dear parents, I can't make any decision.
Your choice determines my future.
Fellow students, exercise your right. Go and vote.
Abafumbira mwese muzaze tugende tutera akaruru.
Abanyayuganda mwena mugende mutera akaruru.
Bashange face yihule kuche hudole.
Abantu nyana mujje tugende tukome.
Genda olonde.
Your vote.
My vote. Our vote is our present and our future.
Hey Ugandans, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Dewa Kiki, the Deputy Defense Spokesperson, and actually the Deputy Spokesperson for the Uganda People's Defense Forces. I was hosted on Alternative Digital. I encourage all Ugandans that this is the way to go. Always watch, participate, give your views, and ask questions on Alternative Digitalk. Digitalk, the way to go.
Uganda is born again.
Mubirabye. Mubiwulidde.
And you will see what NRM means. We are going to crush those criminals.
Mubyenyigiddemu.
We are simply peacefully telling our people, say no to rigged elections.
Ebimu mubitegeera.
Naffe tusobola okutiisatiisa abo abatiisatiisa.
Oba oli awo ng'abamu mugwamu bigwe. Byabaffe byava ku ki?
Era kyova olaba baatukolera ne constitution esinga obusiru mu nsi yonna.
Bino n'ebirala birindirire buli lwa Sande okuva ku ssaawa 11 okutuuka ku ssaawa 1 ey'akawungeezi n'eyaliko Katikkiro wa Buganda Oweekitiibwa Dani Muliika ku program Eriiso ly'Omukulu ku Facebook page The Alternative Uganda.
The world is at a critical moment of providing innovative alternatives as a means to create change.
As such, we have created a not-for-profit alternative mobile digital platform as a way to promote space for freedom of speech and expression to the unheard voices.
We know you believe in the cause and you can further it more by contributing to its sustainability in forms of internet data, fuel, and any other support you deem relevant.
Please support us with your contribution to Equity Bank account number 103-5201-607252 under the name Alternative Digital, or our mobile money numbers 0702-900076 or 0783-047785. Alternative Digital. Real issues, real talk.
The Alternative Digitalk. Real issues, real talk.
Thank you, whoever is watching us. We can't thank you enough for waking up in the morning from 7 to 9 and continue following us and also commenting and giving us your views in regards to how best we can continue doing our advocacy through digital media. We still have Councillor Nicholas Opiyo in these next 40 minutes or thereabout discussing the law and rights, but also good governance. Councillor, I want to take you back to the entire sequence of events as you have followed them. Do you think a fellow advocate, Justice Byabakama, with his electoral commission, are managing things as they ought to do?
Well, there's always room for improvement to do better. But I think in the case of the electoral commission, and this is partly a historical problem, that they have not enjoyed public confidence that they are able to organize free and fair elections. First, by the manner in which they are appointed. The president single-handedly appoints commissioners of the electoral commission without consultation of other political actors. The suggestion to bring in people representing other shades of opinion have been roundly rejected. Any suggestion to amend the law to create for a more independent commission has been roundly rejected. Secondly, you have to look at the conduct of previous elections. The Supreme Court has on 2 occasions found the Commission to have acted incompetently in regards to presidential elections. They have not distinguished themselves as capable of holding the security forces accountable. as being able to protect candidates in the process of election. So the commission is hostage to what I think is a military process, and Justice Bemokama and his team just seem unable to do anything about it. There are times you see him in interviews throwing his hands in the air and said, what can I do? What should I do? I have done my best. But perhaps on a very important note is that people have histories. Justice Simon Byamakama doesn't have the best of history in regard to the political position in this country. As a prosecutor of the amateurish, malicious rape case against Colonel Dr. Kiza Besigye, people will never see him in any other light. They would think of him as, an agent of President Museveni. And so they do not enjoy public confidence, both because of the structural problems of the commission, but also the manner in which they are appointed, as well as the past conduct of the chairperson of the commission. People will always think of them as an NRM electoral commission, not as the National Electoral Commission.
Okay. Now one asks, with your views, it already shows Mr. Byamakama and the rest as being competent. But that does not mean we shouldn't continue with our process because we are a mid-state. What should Ugandans do thereafter, in your view?
As a lawyer, the good judge is a terrific lawyer. There's no doubt about it. And I think that left to do the right thing, he would make an excellent arbiter in the electoral process. But like all of us, we operate in a very repressive system where independence might be your undoing, not a virtue. Doing the right thing in public offices might land you in trouble as opposed to doing the right thing. Let's take, for example, nomination exercises that we watched on TV. A candidate walks before you with nearly torn suit, barefoot, with his shirt in all manners of shape, and you're unbothered to ask, what is the matter, Honorable? Because we know Honorable Power as a smart, tall, gentle giant. He shows up ragtagged. A sensible commission would have asked what the problem was and sought to address it before nominations.
So in your view, that's when he okayed this violence, because if he didn't even bother asking.
He didn't. Honorable Bobby Wine shows up 30 minutes late to nomination. Instead of asking what the problem is, he's being admonished. And shortly thereafter, he's being brutalized within watching distance of the commission. And the commission goes on as if nothing has happened. So they really seem to be captive to a system that will never allow even the most competent of persons to do what they have to do to ensure a free and fair election. Now, that said, every election is important regardless of just how badly organized it is. First, the down ballot, because the down ballot is what is more flexible. The attrition rates in the down ballot has been amazing. For members of parliament, for district councillors, district chairpersons, sub-county chairpersons, it is refreshing because at that level, it appears that the voters are able to refresh and change leaders often. The attrition rate in parliament in the last elections was almost 68%. So out of every 100 MP, 68 was voted out and new ones came. So the election is still important for the down ballot for many Ugandans. We might complain about unfair election at the presidential level, but I think at the parliamentary and other lower level elections, there is a significant chance for voters to change leaders. Secondly, in Uganda, the only time that you have to traverse this country and speak to the people, perhaps is only during elections. Outside of the election calendar, the opposition cannot gather and go around the country to mobilize. So the electoral period provides an important time for mobilization for change, mobilization for parties to be able to build membership, but it does also provide a sense of hope because it is the time when you have the opportunity to hear alternative views. But all of that said, we must be vigilant because the Electoral Commission and the people who are holding them hostage can be overwhelmed by the 44 million Ugandans. Register to vote, make sure you know where your polling station is, cast that vote. Because a narrow margin is easier to steal than a wider margin. So, especially those of us who are educated, who are elites, who tend to stay away from the ballot, register, make sure you know where you're going to vote. Because the effect of staying away is one that you allow other people to decide for you who should govern you, but also more importantly, you allow people like President Museveni to have a majority of a minority vote. Because nearly 54% of voters just didn't turn up, allowing only about 46 to decide, and President Museveni won the majority of the 46. So you're allowing a majority of the minority to rule all of us. So just register, take part in the election, regardless of who you are. Let your voice count. But once you've cast your vote, and I learned something very important as a young man in 1996, when the Honorable Norbert Mao was contesting against the Honorable Betty Bikobere. Norbert Mao was a young, poor lawyer working for a legal aid clinic in Gulu. He had just 2 years before then lost the CA election to Mzee Lord Andrew Adimola. But here he was inspiring a new generation of voters in my district in Gulu. And people were energized, enthused, and involved in the election. Once they cast their ballot, even before casting ballots, if you're a returning officer, you get a voting box, a ballot material to take to a polling station. They followed you, they slept around your house and made sure that you didn't stuff that ballot box. You took it to the polling station, they followed you there, they sat there and counted their votes and escorted their votes to the tally center. I think we have to be vigilant to protect the ballot because election rigging happens not on the booth where people are voting, but on the way to it and the way out of it.
It's also not an event.
It is a process. So they rig when they are bringing materials and when they are returning results to the returning officer. So just wake up, forget about what you are doing for just that one day in the year. Determine what will happen for you in 5 years. Get out, protect the ballot.
Great. Our followers and viewers, we're still on the Alternative Dig Talk, but also on our social media page. That's the Alternative Uganda. We still have Council Nicholas Opiyo. Council, this very week we hosted your senior retired Justice George Wilson Kanyihamba. He calls himself an old bird. So this old bird, while we interviewed him, I asked him a question I want to also put back to you.
Yeah.
I asked him on whether there is necessity for petitions, especially electoral petitions. And he said that the government, through Judicial Service Commission, we are investigating over 100 magistrates and some judges in regards to corruption tendencies. Do you think corruption has entrenched into your department because you are an officer of court as well? And that question is followed by another question. Do you think that time given to petitioners is enough for them to gather evidence and continue petitioning and having a successful petition, especially presidential petition?
You're asking me a very tricky question because I still practice the law and I have to go before judges and magistrates. But let me see, look, and to be very honest with you, the judiciary has been very prominent on the list of corrupt institutions. There's a perception of corruption, but there's also the actual reported cases of corruption. There is no doubt that in the court system, there are individuals who have not made the court system look good. There are judges, there are magistrates, and surprisingly, there are lawyers, because judges don't go out looking for clients to source for bribes.
The bribes they don't come from heaven.
They don't drop like manna from heaven. The lawyers are the conveyor belt for the corruption. And I think when people speak about corruption in the judiciary, we must point out that the conveyor belt of corruption in the judiciary is the legal profession. When I still used to serve at the Law Society, we began a project called Bell the Cat under President James Sebuganyi Mukasa. We said if you put a bell on the cat's neck, when the cat is moving, you can hear it. We're trying to weed out corruption in the judiciary. An extraordinary general meeting of the Law Society was convened in which the Law Society recommended a judicial inquiry into corruption in the judiciary. The petition was supposed to be taken to the Speaker of Parliament to appoint an independent commission of inquiry into corruption in the judiciary. That petition was roundly fought by some of the biggest law firms in this country. In fact, it was Justice Kanyahamba who, on his own volition, took that petition to the Speaker of Parliament. But when he took it, he was disowned by members of the bar. You know, they were frightened and afraid for the curtain to be opened so that we see what's happening behind. There are law firms that have judges on their payroll, that have magistrates on their payroll. So the legal profession is perhaps, if you want to deal with corruption in the judiciary, is the place you need to start with. In terms of election petitions, again, at the down ballot, many people have had successful election petitions, and it is important for them to try if they think that there is a violation of the law. But I think that there can never be enough time for one to file a petition. Rather, if you're going into an election, you must go into an election believing that you will either win it or lose it fairly or unfairly, and conduct an election as if you're collecting evidence for a petition. Because that's the only way you're going to have to. First, the evidence is easy to collect. It is fresh. People have seen it. People can be able to, write witness statements instantly. So if I were a candidate, I'll go into an election with a team of election lawyers collecting evidence of violations of electoral rules. First, with the intention of correcting it if I still can before the election. And secondly, with the view of making sure that I use that evidence if I have to, if I lose unfairly. So I think that preparations of candidates, the way we approach elections, is also important, because there cannot be enough time to prepare for an election. At the presidential level, the Supreme Court has recommended more time, and I think the amendment of the law has provided for more time. But even then, that more time may not be enough, because the evidence that the candidate has to collect is from all over the country. So go into an election believing you might need evidence to challenge it.
Okay. We have, of course, no doubt that the foreign observers aren't coming here.
Yeah.
What's your take as a human rights lawyer? What's the significance of their decline to come and observe elections?
I spent months trying to persuade foreign election observation missions to come to Uganda. I told them, I said, don't switch off the lights, because foreign observation is the light in this dark political atmosphere. That many things could have gone worse but for the presence of foreign election observation missions. And the result may not be mega significant and visible, but at individual level at polling stations, people act with restraint because they know there is an EU mission here, there is an African Union mission here watching this election. And so foreign election observation missions were important at so many levels for many people who would have not had a chance to cast their vote. But also the Electoral Commission acts differently when dealing with foreign election observers than they do with local observers. So I think it is a missed opportunity, but you also understand them, because, for example, the European Union has argued that they have observed elections in this country. They have made numerous recommendations for reforms, and that these recommendations have been ignored. Why then would they come and monitor the election? It's a legitimate concern, but the absence of foreign election observers is deeply concerning, and perhaps is going to mean that many things will go bad. The restraint that people would have because of the presence of foreign observation missions will now not be there, and they will be unleashed. But secondly, and more importantly, the credibility of the election will be undermined, because even local observers are being, denied the role to observe the election. I remember at some point they were being told, when you observe, don't tell the public, don't post on social media. You first come to the commission, let us see what you have. We should be the one to communicate to the public. So local observation election mission are also being suffocated, and I think that this election will not be observed in a way that it should be observed either by foreigners or by a local observation mission. Accountability mechanism, because outside of the observation missions, you have journalists reporting and covering the election and telling the world what's happening. We have now begun to see the deportation of foreign journalists, the denial of accreditation to foreign journalists, because they are the ones who are now going to be reporting. The Foreign Correspondents Association has reported numerous cases of assault, intimidation, expulsion of foreign journalists. And so the light is indeed being switched off for democracy to die in darkness, to borrow the phrase used by the Washington Post.
Please, I do not want to leave that at that, but also to ask. We saw the foreign observers in Kenya, and they made their reports and the rest. And by the way, they even said, okay, the process was okay, until when Justice Malanga and of course others proved them otherwise. Do you think the foreign observers still have that reputation to protect, and say, once they say such an election was free and fair, that citizens will follow them and say their word is true?
No, the same thing happened in Malawi when the European election observers said that the election was free and fair, and the Malawian Supreme Court thought otherwise and nullified the election. In Uganda, you had in the last election the difficulty that the observation missions had to describe the election. They said it was somewhat free, somewhat fair.
50-50.
Really, election can only be fair or unfair.
It can't be both.
So definitely there is a credibility issue about foreign observers observing the election and their reports.
Are they so quick to make recommendations and reports or something like that?
Not necessarily. I think that the
way
that they observe the election is rather in a very short time, because elections are determined by many other factors.
So in your view, they should be here as early as the process begins, because it's a process, not an event.
Yeah, not an event. You don't just come and observe on voting day. Voting day appears come, but the election will have been stolen a long time ago. Observers should now be in the country documenting the obstruction of presidential candidates. They should now be in the country observing the intimidation of the press, the locking out of candidates from media houses. They should now be here documenting that, because those are the things that determine the election. So we can have a useful discussion about the construct, the formation and nature of foreign election observation missions, and the atmosphere in which they work, and the time which they have to be able to be credible. Of course, they still have to do a good job and protect their credibility, but there's also now a consistent attempt to delegitimize foreign observation missions, because autocratic regimes like Uganda, or indeed like those in Malawi, will make it exceedingly difficult for observation missions to come in time. For example, you've seen the letters between the European Union and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs here. The European Union is saying we were not invited to observe the election. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs says, no, we invited you. So what they then do is invite you at the 11th hour. At the 11th hour.
With specific conditions as well.
Yeah, with conditions, you can't do this, you can't do this. So states now are also doing what they can, especially autocratic states, to muzzle observation missions because they know how potent they can be in electoral process. In Kenya, a lot of the evidence before the Kenyan Supreme Court was actually reports from observers. Even though observers said the elections were free and fair, their evidence made it onto the floor of the court and determined in some way or another the findings of the court in Kenya in nullifying the election. So yes, they have a long way to go to win credibility, but they also must know that elections are an event that takes a long time.
Councillor Nicholas Opiyo, no doubt they are not coming. Where does it leave citizens and the voters or the entire country at large?
First of all, the point has to be made that our election must be protected by ourselves, not by some foreigners. The primary duty to protect our vote, our democracy, lies with us as Ugandans. We cannot look to some foreigners to come and help us do that. We must take that cardinal role seriously and step out and protect the vote and make sure that we weed out actions that threaten our franchise. Because if you look to foreigners, people tend to fold their hands. And I like what the young people are doing in the country, in spite of the violence, coming out to express themselves, coming out to contest, getting on social media to campaign. I think we must ask the citizens to look to ourselves, not to foreigners, to make our election better. Any help by observation missions is supplementary. It cannot replace our primary obligation to ensure that the first thing that I think we must do is rid ourselves of the fear, the sense that the election is now determined. Even if I vote, it doesn't matter.
Predetermined,
will still win. So and so will still win. No. The power of your vote. Let your vote count. Go and cast it. Go and count it. Go and protect it. It might be the difference between a bad leader and a good leader. Elections have been won on very narrow margins. And I think that most times those who stay away do us all a disservice.
Okay. So there is this talk, and of course promoted, if I'm not mistaken, by the president, that people like you and others are more or less agents of the West, and perhaps that's why you and others been so much into inviting the foreign observers to be here. What's your comment?
First, President Museveni is very clever. He's a political strategist. He will accuse foreign governments of interfering. He says foreigners interfering in the election in Uganda. But he will not name one foreign state. Okay? Because there's none. The only statement, that statement is made with a view of fending off development partners from holding him to account. It's been so effective so that when he now meets diplomats, these diplomats spend time explaining to him why they're not involved in Ugandan election, instead of holding him to account to the standards for which they should. So it's an effective mechanism. It is also scapegoating people, because every time President Museveni has found himself with his back to the wall, facing stiff competition, he sought to blame it on foreigners. When Dr. Kizza Besigye came up, when Paul Kawanga Semogere came up, when Amama Mbabazi came up, he will blame foreigners for financing that person. So it is a bogus statement. It is without basis. It is simply meant to distract people. It is scapegoating other people. Secondly, as a Ugandan citizen, I have a legitimate right to take part in the affairs of my country.
Not with the support of the West.
Notwithstanding the sources of my income. I can, because you see, President Museveni has been, in fact, many of us in civil society accuse the West of keeping Museveni in power, because they fatten the beast, they give money, equipment to that police force that is killing people on the street. So, in fact, if there's anybody who has been retained in power
by the West,
it is President Museveni. But also, think about it this way. All businessmen in this country and banks get money from Western capital. So liquidity, capital investments, is from foreign venture capitalists, is from foreign investment firms. But we don't have any concerns about them simply on account of benefiting from a foreign financial source. But when you seem to be critical of the state, they're very quick to say, because your NGO gets money from some foreign foundation, therefore that foreign foundation is financing you for a regime change. Complete nonsense. I think it's without basis. It's a statement that must be disregarded with the contempt that it deserves. Because if he has balls, let me just speak the language that young people speak. If indeed he has balls, let him name that country that is seeking to overthrow him from power and therefore financing people here. Let him name one country, if indeed he has balls. Or if indeed there's any country. There is none. If foreign countries want Museveni out of power, he will be out of power in a minute, because they have demonstrated elsewhere that if they don't want Gaddafi, they'll kick him out. If they don't want Mugabe in Zimbabwe, they will kick him out. So if foreign governments want Museveni out of power, they have the financial, military, economic leverage to chase Museveni out of town in a minute. They just haven't gotten to that point, and I think that President Museveni should be happy he hasn't gotten to that point.
Great. Our viewers, we're still on the alternative.
Governments are more sophisticated. They don't work like that. They're not like petty thieves, cowards who go and finance somebody to go and do stuff. If they want him out of power, he would be out of power. Either bombed out of power or otherwise.
One of our viewers is asking, Council, what's your relationship because on behalf of the NGOs with the government? Are you managed? Do you think you are given some kind of liberty to operate, or you think there is something that is lacking? Because this person is basing on to the NGO, is it NGO Bureau, something?
Yes, the NGO Bureau.
NGO Bureau, and how it's either managing or mismanaging you as NGOs.
First of all, many of us who practice human rights law have argued that the freedom of association, that we must create a positive presumption in favor of the freedom of association. That there has to be a presumption of goodwill, that I get out to associate with no man for a common and lawful cause, and that I should not do so with the registration and permission of the state. What the NGO laws have done in this country is to create a disfavor for any organizing to think that you're up to no good and therefore you must be given a permit, you must be registered with the state. I think that for me is actions to defeat the right, and we've challenged that in a court of law. Secondly, once you then register... Is the case
disposed of already?
No, we just filed a case against the NGO Act. The case is still working through the court process. Hopefully we can get it heard soon. Secondly, when you register, you become a subject of regulation and control.
Yeah, you offer your cell phone to them.
You're like a goat that is tethered on a rope and tied. You can only eat grass on a particular circumference. You can't go beyond it.
You go by the rope.
Yeah, you have to, the length of the rope determines how far you can eat. And so any NGO that is registered is now like a tethered goat. The goat owner can determine how far the rope can go. And the NGO Bureau, unfortunately, has been a very bad goat owner. We've had cases of the NGO Bureau trying to deregister NGOs because they are involved in election monitoring. Recently, you had them declaring a domestic election observation mission as unconstitutional and lawful simply because they are called New Uganda. So there's deep concerns about the relationship between the state and the civil society. If you are involved in distributing mosquito nets, they have no problem with you because you are in essence underpaying. You're subsidizing the inefficiency of the state. So you can go and build a health center, essentially replace the state.
So as long as you don't talk about human rights.
Don't talk about accountability. Even if you build a health center, don't talk about accountability for drugs. It's not your place. So if you're involved in the humanitarian section, you're most likely going to have a good day as an NGO. But if you're involved in governance and accountability, because take an example, humanitarian NGOs actually get money from abroad as well to go and provide food to hungry children, to go and dig boreholes and run health centers. But they have no problem with them. As long as you talk about accountability, you seek to hold the state to account, then they say, aha, you're an agent of a foreign power. It is less about where your money is coming from, but more about the fact that you're investigating them and the message you're sending.
We saw Action Aid as one of the agencies that time during Tojikwatako being squeezed, if I should use the word, and that was publicly known. Are you being squeezed, and when the public doesn't know, internally as NGOs, when it comes to your finances and the rest, internally, and perhaps it's not known to the public, because that time the Gilis was raided.
Yeah.
In fact, even you in particular, your office has for so many times been broken into.
Yeah.
So, are you being broken into internally now, not physically coming into your offices to break them, but rather also breaking into any resources or anything internally, and the public doesn't know?
If you read the Daily Monitor of yesterday, it reported that 4 NGOs have had their accounts frozen.
Oh.
And many of the NGOs that were interviewed, in spite of the fact that their accounts were frozen, were unwilling to commit publicly and admit that their accounts were frozen.
You see? So they're trying to negotiate internally or something?
Because there's a sense of fear. So there are such means now being applied as a means of repression. There may not be a physical raiding of an NGO, but financial restrictions that are now being imposed on NGOs that will make it very difficult for them to operate. And then you can go through rigorous and ending loops of investigations on allegations for terror financing, for example. The Financial Intelligence Authority has been investigating several NGOs and has ordered the halting, for them they don't call it freezing, the halting of transactions on several accounts of NGOs. So yes, there's a subtle, unreported, numerous pressures on non-government organizations. We have seen, for example, international organizations that have had their staff members expelled. The DGF had a staff member told that he's an unwanted alien in this country, and the individual is now stuck somewhere in Europe. You have the International Republican Institute. The executive director went on maternity leave. When she tried to come back into the country, she was told, don't come back. So there are people now that are being affected, NGOs that are being affected, both local and international, either by means of expulsion, account freezing, and unending investigations.
Council, is there, as of now, is there any specific change in regards to the same violations, if I should use the word, that once it comes to the electoral season, this mistreatment worsens?
It's a wave. Election seasons tend to be a spike in the onslaught, especially on civil liberties, because people seek to challenge status quo and on the one hand, and on the other hand, there are people who are trying to maintain power. So there is contestation, and election seasons tend to be heightened seasons for human rights violation. And with every election, the extent of violence or violation depends on the nature of challenge the incumbent is facing. Every time President Museveni is facing a strong challenge, he's more vicious. So the strength of the candidates contesting against the incumbent determines how vicious he is and how determined he is to crush, the language of crushing. And you can tell by his body language. When you see President Museveni addressing the nation dressed in a military attire, you know that he's panicking. You know that he's panicking. He's trying to send a message of strength, and then he begins to become insultive. He begins looking annoyed and upset. It's a sign of panic, and this tends to happen when presidential elections face serious challenges to him. And I think that this time what we have seen is President Museveni perhaps knows how to deal with conventional opposition organizing. He's facing a very difficult campaign that he's never done before by largely unconventional people. On the one hand, people like the Honorable Gregory Mugisha Muntu, consummate gentleman, issue-based, organizing from down up. And he has no idea what's coming from down up. On the other hand, you have a young musician, a political novice, who appears to have been dismissed at the beginning, but now is creating a lot of problems. And so this has made him very uncomfortable, hence the large deployments you see, the violations of rights. Electoral periods, unfortunately, tend to be periods of heightened violations of rights, especially when the incumbent is facing a serious challenge to his hold on power.
Great. Council, we have a law against money laundering.
Yeah.
In your view, was it brought in good faith? Or it's 50-50?
There's a general, and it's more than just money laundering, there's a general international movement around money laundering. But there's something more to that law that people don't pay attention to.
Especially to African governments or something?
Which is called terror financing.
Yeah.
Terror financing. And the definition of terror financing, there was a whole amendment to the Anti-Terrorism Act to define just terror financing alone. And that definition is quite broad and quite interesting, and includes providing money and finances to anyone who is doing anything that puts the government in disfavor. It's a very broad definition that you have to look at. I think it is section 7 or 9 of the Anti-Terrorism Act Amendment of 2015. It is a very insidious law. I think that the intention may be good, but the application by autocratic systems and regimes like Uganda has really been to the extreme. They have expanded this definition of terror financing and money laundering to the extent that if you're supporting a political opposition, you can actually be deemed to be committing acts of terrorism. And so, while the intention of fighting global terrorism and illicit financial flows is a good one, its application, its bastardization by other governments like Museveni's government is what has made it a very dangerous tool in a country like ours. The Anti-Money Laundering Act has been passed and amended several times, because each time they see it, it's something they want to do, they will amend it. The Anti-Terrorism Act, the same thing. So I think that there has also been a perversion of the good intention of curbing terror financing and curbing money laundering.
Also to suffocate even the genuine fundraisers.
It's now being used to suffocate everybody.
In the remaining few minutes, Kaso, you have taken us through the entire sequence of events, how rights are being violated, and to mention but a few. What should a citizen of my district deep there in Iwengo or any other far place do in regards to pushing back? Because no doubt, as per your words, the space is being shrunk every now and again. What are those words of wisdom to them?
The people in my village, in your village in Luengo, in my village in Gulu, in all other villages, must begin to create a nexus between the poor state of their lives, the bad roads, the bad schools, the bad hospitals, to governance. It is a governance problem. When you hear that Gavi funds have been stolen in Kampala, it's not some money in Kampala.
It's the taxes.
It's taxpayer money. It is the money supposed to provide medication to allow women to give birth without fear of dying in health centers. So we must connect our state of life. The reason you are still holding a hand hoe and digging from morning to sunset and digging less than 50 meters is a governance problem. And if you are intent on changing the status of your life, you must be involved in determining the governance system and trend in this country. If you vote corrupt people in power, you are essentially tying yourself in a web of incompetence, in a web of corruption. If you exchange your vote for a bottle of waraji, for a kilo of salt, a kilo of sugar, you're mortgaging the future for 5 years in the hands of a corrupt, incompetent individual. I think that citizens must make the connection between their daily lives and the governance problems we are seeing at the national level. Secondly, participate. Do not leave participation to other people. Do not think that the election is now determined, Museveni will win, or so and so will win. Go and cast that ballot. Hold your duty as a citizen and participate in the election. But also, once you've voted, don't think that voting is enough. You must every single day wake up to hold governments to account. That Chairman LC3, that cow of a district, that RDC of a district must account to you. You must ask them to account. You must put them on their toes and not leave them to have their day in stealing and pillaging public resources.
The final question, as we live here, as an advocate, I am sure, as day follows night, that there could be some bad laws in our main or mother law, the Constitution. If you had an opportunity to have them amended, in particular, where do you think we need some amendments in, especially with the Constitution?
We must return the safety valves and safeguards that the framers of our Constitution put. The preamble of our Constitution is beautiful and people don't read it. It recognizes the turbulent constitutional and political history of our country and sets on a path to ensure a stable, durable constitution based on the principles of peace, development, unity. Okay? People need to read the preamble of that constitution. So we must bring back the safeguards. These safeguards include presidential term limits, presidential age limits. We must go back to the question of natural resources and return land into public trust, because in 2005 we amended Article 244 of the Constitution and made natural resources the property of government. We removed it from the public trust doctrine, and that's how you're seeing forests now being grabbed, wetlands being taken. So we must go back and return natural resources and public property in the trust of the public, but administered and held by government. We must, of necessity, ensure the independence of institutions. The Honorable Betty Kamea, before she got saved into the yellow camp, was making a very good campaign that I signed up to. We must trim the power of the presidency, because we can't allow one individual in the country to appoint nearly everybody in this country. We must reduce the power of the presidency. We must reduce the cost of public expenditure, reduce the size of parliament. If I were head of state, I would have 2 MPs per district, 1 female, 1 male. I would remove the army from parliament because they have no place in parliament, send them back to the barracks. I would remove women representation, affirmative action that is cosmetic, and ensure that every district has a male and female MP, period. Reduce the size of parliament, spend that money to build hospitals and provide better services to this country.
Great. Our viewers, it's been the Mighty Drive show. It's been streaming live as always, Monday to Friday. Today we had Councillor Nicholas Opiyo, the ED for Chapter 4. He has shared with us law, constitutionalism, good governance, but also human rights. And that's why his organization, the organization that he heads, is Chapter 4, that goes deep into defending rights as per the Bill of Rights in our Constitution of 1995 as amended. Councillor, thank you for being with us, for creating time to be with us and educating the world. I am sure that your civic education has been so impactful to so many of us, and also the people that are following and watching us. May you please continue doing so everywhere we invite you and offer the same time, because the country needs people like you. And most importantly, being one of us in regards to the generation, we believe that with you and others we can add our crystal contributions towards changing this country to the country we all of us want to live for our children and our grandchildren. I can thank you now.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this innovation, and thank you for the invitation and for giving me the platform to share my views. I do appreciate it. Thank you very much.
So humbled. See you tomorrow. We'll be hosting some other person that will be letting you know, and also keep our hopes alive. Let's do all that we need to do as active citizens, because it's our mandate. No one else would do it for us. We must do it ourselves. May God bless one and bless all of us. Thank you.
The Alternative Digital. Real issues, real talk.
The world is at a critical moment of providing innovative alternatives as a means to create change.
As such, we have created a not-for-profit alternative mobile digital platform as a way to promote space for freedom of speech and expression to the unheard voices.
We know you believe in the cause and you can further it more by contributing to its sustainability in forms of internet data, fuel, and any other support you deem relevant.
Please support us with your contribution to Equity Bank account number 103-5201-607252 under the name Alternative Digital, or our mobile money numbers 0702 900076 or 0783 047785. Alternative Digital, real issues, real talk.
The Alternative Digital. Real issues, real talk.